good. So we get to our next presentation, and this is by Mr. Said Jalal Masoumi. Mr. Masoumi graduated from Kabul University as a civil engineer, served as construction engineer in the Ministry of Education, attended graduate studies in structural engineering at Newcastle University in UK, rejoined Ministry of Education and handled nationwide school construction projects. We need to talk because that's what I'm doing now. Served as resident engineer, roadway construction project, Iran Ministry of Transport, and for the past 28 years have had various assignments in transportation construction with VDOT. And he is gonna be speaking about a very, very important topic, which is infrastructure construction. And you know, no city exists without infrastructure. So without further ado, here is Mr. Masoumi.
Salam everyone. پس از سلام من فکر میکنم که لنچی که خوردیم و بسیار یک لنچ مزه‌دار بود. خدا کنه که اسباب خوابیدن ما فراهم نکنه و من کوشش میکنم که از او اعتراض کنم. And I will speak in English because اگرچه که خود من آنجا گفته بودن به انگلیسی گپ میزنم زیادتر به فارسی شد. من چون کلمه چطور میشه
از ما آمد معصومی است گفتارم دیش
شعرتان چالان شد. من میبینم که قافیه و وزن تراش چطور میشه. Land development obviously ultimately reduces to project developments, and projects with for purpose of either a national economy or a local economy can also be defined as infrastructure assets. Some examples of infrastructure assets would be transportation projects, housing projects, irrigation schemes, municipal plants, industrial plants, and so on and so forth. And for the good of that national economy or local economy, these infrastructure assets would have to be delivered for that society or for that economy. And there are methods of delivery of such infrastructure assets that the construction industry has identified as the design, bid, build method, the design, build method, and design, build, operate, maintain method. P3, short for public-private partnership. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to focus more on the design, bid, build process, but I think the generality of my conversation applies to all. In fact, let me go back to some other consideration, which is the project cycle. A project is conceived through a concept based on some need, and then that concept subsequently gets to be in some design phase of, some engineering design that then goes to construction and then goes to an owner maintains it, operates it, and maintains it. As far as the design is concerned, after the concept design, the owner identifies either through in-house resources or through a procurement process, a designer who goes about the task of developing the design, which again involves a feasibility study, followed by detailed preliminary designs, followed by detailed designs, and all of those preliminary designs, detailed designs would require owner review so that the need is adequately covered in the design stage. And the design or designer, the design consultant or designer will have to produce also for the owner's benefit tender documents, which tender documents, among other things, would include an engineer's estimate of the cost, an owner's schedule, and a schedule of quantities. With that in hand, the owner, of course, decides. And by the way, when I'm making this conversation, I'm thinking of owner being a governmental agency, whether it's a Ministry of Agriculture, or Ministry of Energy, or Ministry of Public Works, or whoever. So then this owner takes the designs and puts out for bidders to bid upon. And the owner also has a choice of selecting different construction contracting alternatives depending on what is being done and how that may best suit the needs of the project. Contracting techniques available to the owner would be the lump sum or fixed cost contract, the cost plus fee, which is a fixed amount or percentage of the cost, unit price contracting, or time and material. Contracting process itself is essentially a risk evaluation and risk shifting process. Owners certainly have the option of not going out to bidders and doing all the work themselves, but during any construction, whether it's a 1 month or 10-year project, there are risks associated with that work that has to be performed. And over time, based on experience, owners have determined that it's best to put the risk of those unknowns onto somebody else who would be the contractor. And that contractor, in his own wisdom and experience, makes an assessment of that risk involved and puts that out into the bids through a costing exercise for a compensation that the owner would have to give. I mentioned the risk because all these various forms of contracting have their own merits and advantages as far as risk-taking is concerned for the owner and for the contractor. Perhaps the least risky for the contractor is time and material. The most equitable risky or risk-taking contracting is the unit pricing. The heaviest risk-taking for the contractor is lump sum or fixed cost, because once they sign the contract, that's what it is. Cost plus fee also has its risks, but this is actually, except for the time and material, no, not in the order of risk. And so once the designs are complete, they go out for bidding, and bidders submit their bids, and the bids are evaluated. But before they go to bids, I have to go to this one. Owners will make a determined effort to minimize their chances of failure by not accepting any Joe Blow as a contractor, but rather measuring him out upfront by pre-qualification process, whereby the proposed contractors or the bidders' technical as well as financial competency and capability is assured, who then enters the bidding process, which then ends up into what would be a contract award. And after the contract is awarded, the due process of construction begins. And like I said earlier, depending on what type of contracting has been determined, fixed cost, cost plus fee, time and material, or unit pricing, the game of contracting between owner and contractor begins. And depending on the size of the project, it could be a very voluminous contract with a lot of detail. As good practice, in the 28 years of my experience with the Virginia DOT, even though contract documents are specifying or identifying what needs to be done, it is advised that before construction begins, 5 minutes, the contractor and owner representatives who have hands-on participation in the field get together to identify exactly what needs to be done and how it has to be done. And contract, of course, because time is money, has to comply with a schedule that usually is specified in the contract, although of course the contractor has the prerogative of developing his own schedule, and more often than not they do. And in some new arrangements that have come into the practice, some contracts are being structured to include incentives or disincentives for the contractor to attain certain specified milestones for which he receives bonus or incentive if he completes ahead of time, or disincentives, penalties, if he misses those milestones. I think a construction project is no different than many other projects, and in project management, the 3 pillars of any project management would be quality, budget, schedule. That is, a product has to be delivered, or the contract has to be delivered with quality, on time, and within budget. To the extent that budget is an important consideration, change conditions which become inevitable part of a construction contract, because at design, at the initial stages, every best effort is made to embody all the needs, yet in actual practice, things that were not catered for at that time because they were not known then pop up, and they lead to changed conditions. Changed conditions often mean more time and more money, and effectively more cost either for the owner or for the contractor. Owners usually put out a team of representatives on the site called the inspectors or inspection team, who do the eyes and ears of the owner in the field to ensure that the work that the contractor is supposed to do is done per the contract requirements, per the guidelines, per specifications. The good quality material, the conformance to the requirements of the contract, accurate measurement of quantities that the contractor performs. And that inspection team has a very important task of going through the good documentation process, because a contract is as good as the intentions lead the 2 parties to, yet actually things do pop up that give rise to disputes and disagreements, and if those disputes, disagreements do not get resolved appropriately, it means litigation and court cases, and again dragging and headaches and hassles and time and money again. And everybody, of course, does every effort to minimize those difficulties. So a good contract, or a good procedure in the contracting process would be to anticipate dispute occurrence and how to resolve them. And again, in my experience, there were articles or provisions in the contract for dispute resolution. And the cycle of what I said earlier on about concept development, design, construction, maintenance, operation. Finally, if a good construction contract comes to an end, and even if it does not and some disputes are handled meanwhile, the work is at one point declared as complete, and the owner takes acceptance of that project, and then for purpose of operation and maintenance, it shifts on to a different agency of that owner for maintenance. Well, that was the signal. Time is up. I hope I didn't bore you. Thank you.